This is the third thing I've done with Maggie. And, of course, when you write, anyway, when you write, or I write, I tend to cast it in my head whether or not people play the parts, because it helps you give people different voices. Otherwise, the danger is everyone talks with the same voice. And I do imagine Maggie playing these parts. Of course, if she hadn't played it, I would now be lying and saying that whoever had was my first choice. But in fact, she is my first choice because she just has that extraordinary quality of being very caustic and very tough, and yet remaining kind of witty and a sense of a kind of inner good heart, which is a very tricky performance to bring off, actually. And yet she does it wonderfully. And so, yes, I do write specifically for Maggie.
And she does get all the funnies, doesn't she?
Well, all seems a bit harsh.
But it works. The rest of us sort of have to carry the emotional. Yes, I've just drowned every single.
Well done.
The emotional journey of
good.
the story. So, in a sense, it works very well if she can come in and just lighten the load a little bit, and then knit back to her trailer.
Was she like that
Julian.
on set? Because she's famous for making other people corpse, but
Do you mean was she a laughing minute?
yeah.
Why are you looking at me? She made me laugh.
Yes,
she made
she
me
is.
laugh anyway.
She made me laugh.
Doesn't take prisoners, but makes everybody laugh. Makes the prisoners laugh.
Ian Wiley, freelance. Can I ask you, Elizabeth, about any research you did before you started filming, and also if you sort of obviously picture yourself in those roles for real, like, living the lives of those characters, what you imagine their lives would be like?
And was that for both of us?
Both of you.
The only research I did was have lots of dinners with Julian Fellows, because basically I'm playing a combination of him and Lord Carnarvon. No, I do research for projects when it's relevant, but frankly, if it's not on the page, you can't play it. And everything that one needed in this show, I feel, is on the page. And one of the most sort of fully realised sets of characters I've ever come across, which has made it such an incredible thing to read and to play in. And like Julian, you can't help but hear voices when you're reading it. Unfortunately, I heard mine.
I had a fun time reading The Buccaneers. That was my research. Because really I'm an Edith Wharton buccaneer, all grown up and settled into the life they were all looking for. And I'm just pleased that Julian gave us a happy end, more or less, to the story of the rich American looking for the aristocratic name to put her fortune behind.
I think that that phenomenon of the Buccaneers, what people don't perhaps realise, that something like 350 American heiresses married into the peerage in a comparatively short space of time. And the famous ones are the Duchess of Roxburgh and the Duchess of Marlborough and the Countess of Craven and all these. But they formed a sort of group within that group. And what I think in popular culture, we're aware of the American heiress, but what we don't think of is what happened to those women 30 years down the line of living this essentially alien life. They were not in Newport and married to a dry goods millionaire, which what would have happened to them if they'd stayed. They were locked into this different system, and I thought it was fun to kind of explore that, really.
Hi, Tim Oglethorpe, Daily Mirror. Brendan Cole mentions in the press pack etiquette lessons that he underwent. Did you have to undergo those, and if so, what were they like, and what did you learn?
Well, absolutely. We had this genius on set called Alistair Bruce, who is, what's his proper title?
Alistair Bruce of Creanich.
Of Creanich. And what's his role at the College of Arms?
He's one of the heralds, but I can't remember which one.
Basically, he says his day job is to make sure that at the next coronation everyone sits in the right place. And so there is nothing he doesn't know about the structure of that society, and he and Julian could be locked in a room for several days and never get bored talking about it, I know.
Although I'd always defer to Alistair, I have to say. If ever there was something I wasn't sure about, he always knew.
Yeah.
So he's a superior authority.
But there were details. I think what sets this show, as indeed Gosford Park, apart from other shows of its kind, is the attention to detail and the sense of authenticity, down to the extent of, when wearing tails, you don't flick your tails to sit down, as one sees concert pianists do, because your valet will iron them for you. So you just sit, and you certainly don't have to put your hands in your pockets at any stage. And there was one shot when Alistair was away, and my hand snuck into my pocket, and there was sort of calls for a reshoot because, but I think it actually stayed in. It's so dark, that scene, you can actually see my hand in my pocket, but it's there. And Alistair was mortified the next day when he saw the rushes. So from then on, I had my trousers pockets sewn up.
It was so nice to be on a set and have somebody tell you what to do every minute. I miss those days. I think that we should bring it all back because there's no confusion about everything. I absolutely loved it.
And details like, the wearing of gloves and the way was it rolled down at dinner or something. Some etiquette for the ladies about the way that.
Well, they had this wonderful thing which I never knew, which is you have those buttons in the wrist of your glove, and that's because of course you're supposed to take the fingers off and tuck them into the sleeve, and I mean it's
use your knife and fork.
All so much fun.
And I finally learned not to eat peas with my knife.
Yeah, can I ask from the BBC News Web Sidelines, Neil Smith? You obviously mentioned Gosford Park, and was this always in your mind you wanted to kind of do something in this vein, but longer? Was this born when you were writing on that film a few years ago?
I was always rather interested in this way of life because, I was born in 49, and so it had finally sort of died in about 39. I mean, not, still people with butlers, but I mean, as a kind of structure that went from Land's End to John O'Groats, it had kind of died. But very recently, and so when I was young, there were lots of people around, older people, who had lived this life until the Second World War. And it seemed so extraordinary to me that people could all be living under one roof with such entirely different expectations of life, such entirely different ambitions, and kind of rub along together, but living, they might as well have been on different planets. And so when I was asked to do Gosford, it wasn't that I had to get interested in that way of life. It actually, where I was extremely lucky, was my lucky break, which Gosford undoubtedly was, tapped into an interest that was already there. And I did, when Gareth came up to me, as we said, and said, do you feel you can sort of revisit this? Of course, in writing Gosford Park, because it's, whatever it is, 120 minutes or something, there's lots of things you feel you can't quite follow through within that format, although I love the movie, I think it's great. But this offered the opportunity to kind of go on with seeing these different parallel universes and the structures above and below and so on and so forth, that it was rather tempting.
David Collins from TV Choice and Total TV. Did you actually, in your research, find a real-life case that you based the story on?
As I think Evelyn Waugh said, novelists don't make much up. And on the whole, you pick at other people's lives for these characters and situations. There is a situation that I know of where the heir was a very distant relation and was brought to live on the estate. So I suppose you could say that was the sort of original mainspring of it. But, he came as a kind of outsider. And this guy, Dan Stevens' character, Matthew Crawley, is an outsider, although he's not a foreigner, but he is from a different world. And, that creates lots of kind of jangling and jeopardy, and everyone having to get used to everyone else and all of that. So it seemed a good basis.
Hi, I'm Jen Blackburn from The Sun. I just wanted to know how this project came about being commissioned. Was it your idea?
No, it wasn't really my idea. It was Gareth's idea, Gareth Neam's idea, that he felt that the time was right for this sort of subject. And I suppose because of Gosford, I was a kind of obvious, sounds rather vain, doesn't it? There must be other people who would do it much better than me, but I was a sort of choice because of that. So he came to me, and then we just sort of worked on it together, really.
And did you always see it on ITV?
Sorry?
Did you always see it finding a home on ITV? Because it's not I'm a Celebrity, is it, or X Factor?
Well, I don't know that I really understand those distinctions, really. I mean, of course, BBC is lovely because you don't have to stop for advertisements. But, I think when you're writing, or acting for that matter, whoever wants to make the show you want to do, hurrah for them, really.
They suddenly have good taste.
They have very good taste in their writers, in their players.
Phil Penn from Yorkshire Post. What was it like actually being able to have the luxury of filming in this quite extraordinary place with no, well, it doesn't look as if there are very many sets and things like that. I mean, it must have informed your two performances in particular, did it not?
It really was like going into another world. And I would come back from a couple of days and be forced by my kids to go to Westfield or someplace like that and be in a complete state of shell shock. It was, and there's something to be said for a life without Wi-Fi interference in your brain the whole day. I'm telling you, because it was very peaceful.
I have to say, particularly during the volcanic ash period, and we were filming, and it so happened, as you'll have seen, that every time we filmed outside, nearly every single time, we had fantastic weather. And there was that week of the volcanic ash where there was no flies, no air, no planes in the sky, and the silence and the clarity of the sky and the beauty of that place. It did literally, you felt you were transported back into an era before bloody aeroplanes, and you realised quite how magnificent a time that was for anyone, wherever in the country, to have that, as you say, the lack of Wi-Fi and the simplicity of life, and also with that place, just the sheer grandeur. And it's a credit to our wonderful design that you don't realise that there are quite a few sets, actually. But no, we shot the principal rooms, obviously, are at Highclere. And what I love about the house is that it is a house. It is a castle, but it's not, it's not crazily huge. It feels like a home when you're in it. And I think that adds, because Downton is such a vivid character in the show, and I think that really comes across. It feels like a working home rather than a labyrinthine castle.
It was designed to sort of look bigger than it is, wasn't it, really? Because when you get in, it's actually quite taut. You've got one wing, but the bedrooms and the drawing rooms are all around that great hall. And it feels, I hesitate to say domestic, but it isn't quite as enormous as it looks on the screen. What was very good for us was that Carnival sort of bit the bullet and allowed us to shoot all the principal rooms that are the rooms of Hyde, that wonderful library, the drawing room, the dining room, and so on. Because the temptation is always to shoot the exteriors and then get everyone nearer London, so you get away from overnights and all that. And they didn't do that. The two sections that are sets, interestingly, exactly the same as Gosford, because they're so changed in these houses, are the kitchens and the attics. The kitchens have always been made into something much more modern, and the attics have either been converted into flats or they're deserted. And either way, it is easier to build those. But the principal rooms, apart from one pretty significant bedroom, were pretty well all there, weren't they?
Jessica Miller, freelance. Did you, as actors, face any particular challenges during the shoot? Was there anything that stood out that was quite challenging for you?
Corsets. That's all I need to say, I think.
There's a phrase, isn't there, about never working with children and animals. I had a
The dog.
Enough said. I'm hoping that in Series 2 it'll open with the funeral of a dog. No.
If so, it will be replaced by 4 Yorkies.
No, Rowley and I get on very well.
Sarah Dean, AOL. What do you think will appeal to audiences most about the show, and what are your expectations for the show?
When you talk about who's going to watch it and who isn't going to watch it, I think you go mad if you think in those terms, really. What you have to do is you have to make a show you want to see yourself. And if you do that, I mean, that's not an original. That was Spielberg, wasn't it, who said, I only make films I want to see. And I think if you start trying to second guess, this will appeal to teenagers, this will appeal to... then I think you just get lost up your own what's-it, really.
I think what makes any great show work is how people in a group manage to keep life moving. And to me, I can speak to what's fascinating to me when I see it. It's these people in a situation of great intimacy. I mean, again and again and again, you'll find the servants and the upper classes interacting with each other in ways in which their deepest, darkest inner selves are exposed, and yet there's this rigid structure that keeps it all going. And for me, that is what makes it fascinating. And Julian has this brilliant way of keeping the lines breaking down and then putting them back up and breaking down, and watching these people who are so intimately connected and yet so far apart at the same time. That's my answer to that.
I thought that was a very good
answer. That's
answer.
what I find that's so kind of fascinating.
And as Julian said before, apart from a cop shop and a hospital, there are very few places in dramatic terms that you can actually see an entire social spectrum legitimately cohabiting, or convincingly cohabiting. And so I think, in terms of appeal, I think there is genuinely something of interest for all viewers. I genuinely think that.
But in the end, it comes down to whether you've made the characters interesting. And with the cop shop or with the hospital drama, if they've made it interesting, it works. And if they're not interesting, it doesn't work. And that's really true of everything. And you're a better judge of whether we've done that than we are, really, because we're too close.
Yeah,
Good.
That's the right answer.
No, are there any last questions? But you will have a chance to talk to Julian and Elizabeth Hugh in our breakaway groups.
Could I just mention that there is, I'm sure you're aware that there is an upstairs-downstairs on its way. Were you aware of that, and you are prepared for the inevitable comparison?
Well, we weren't aware of it when we started because it hadn't been announced. And I think we were shooting when it was announced. But of course I'm aware of it now. All it says to me is that television people are recognizing there is a market for this kind of aspirational drama. And, good. So I'm sure it'll be a great show. It's got a wonderful cast. And, I wish it nothing but good things. I just hope it, continues to feed and nurture the taste so that we will profit from it.
And there's a set in 1938, I think.
Well, they're going on from where the original series stopped, aren't they?
We'll catch them up eventually.
And although I don't think, is Jean Marsh playing the same character? They can't do that, can she? Because she can't. Oh, is she?
Yeah.
I was going to say she can't suddenly age 40 years in a night, can she? But
Maggie Brown, Lydia Brown, are you expecting this to go to a second series? Do you think it has potential to go on and on? Like
I feel like Mary, if I were to answer truthfully, you would think me very vain. We have to hope. I don't think you can say more than that. You never know how these things will land. I mean, you just don't. And, how often as actors you do something to pay the VAT and it becomes the thing that everyone adores, and something else you think, oh, there's a real award in this, and nobody even bothers to watch past the interval. You can't guess it.
We're 100 years on from Downton, well, down nearly 100 years. Is there anything at all that any of you would like to resurrect from 1912 and have as a thing today, or something that you think should be back with us that's vanished forever, or what?
I wouldn't mind my own personal butler.
I think it was a less angry world. Our politicians now make a great play of constantly encouraging a kind of class warfare because they think it pays off for them. And maybe it does. But I don't know how constructive it is in a society to constantly encourage one half of it to dislike the other half. And I think that was a slightly less angry world. But of course, it was all coming in the wings. I mean, one of the reasons why we went for 1912 is, it was the dawn of trades unionism, it was the dawn of the Labour Party, it was not just electricity and aeroplanes and the obvious things. Enormous chunks of the modern world were coming, but I suppose we would all probably like to live in a less angry world, really.
Okay, if we could leave it there.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to remain seated, please. We have now Gareth Neame, Jim Carter and Phyllis Logan.
Who do we sue? I think they were all still on. I looked at the red line. Yeah, do. That seems fine. So I'm just going to clear the glasses before everyone tips over and
Here we are. If you'd like to take your seats, please, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Jim Carter. Mr. Gareth Neame. And Miss Phyllis Logan. How do you do, everybody?